The laughter was the worst part, not the words. I had heard versions of the words before. At previous dinners, in previous rooms, delivered with the same casual authority of a woman who had spent 15 years being certain about things she had never bothered to examine. The words I had developed armor for. Imperfect armor, the kind that dents but holds. The laughter was different. It started with my Aunt Carol. The reflexive laugh of a woman who follows the emotional lead of whoever is most confident in the room. Then my cousin Brett, who laughed at everything my stepmother Diana said, because Brett had been 17 when Diana entered our family and had, in the years since, simply never updated his social positioning. Then, a ripple of polite, uncomfortable chuckling from the outer edges of the table, from the spouses and partners who were still learning the family's fault lines and had decided, incorrectly, that laughter was the safe choice. 23 people laughing, one woman at the center of it, perfectly composed, wine glass raised slightly in the manner of someone who has just delivered a particularly effective punchline. A staffing company, Diana had said. The repetition of my own words, inflected just enough to transform them into something absurd. You left a perfectly good corporate career to start a staffing company. In this economy. She had looked around the table with an expression of fond, exasperated disbelief. I love you, Petra. I do. But honestly, what are you doing? 23 people laughed. I did not. My name is Petra Vance. I am 34 years old. And this is the story of the dinner party where my stepmother mocked my business in front of our entire family and discovered, 9 days later, that she had been on my payroll for the past 8 months. My father married Diana when I was 19. I was away at university when it happened, or away enough that the transition occurred in my absence. The new furniture and the new energy and the new configuration of the house all established, before I returned for the first holiday and found myself navigating a version of home that had been redecorated without my input. Diana was 41 then. Competent, attractive, organized, and possessed of the specific social fluency of a woman who had learned early that warmth, correctly performed, was more effective than authority. She was warm to me, consistently, reliably warm. The warmth of a professional, not a person, but warm nonetheless. What she was not was interested, in me specifically, in what I thought or felt or wanted or feared or built. She managed the surface of our relationship with practiced ease and never once attempted the excavation that would have been required to know me more than superficially. I had understood this by my second holiday home. I had accepted it by my third. By the time I graduated and began building my adult life, I had filed Diana under the category of permanent background presence, someone whose opinion of me was, by my own deliberate choice, irrelevant. I had maintained this position successfully for 15 years. Then she laughed, and 23 people laughed with her, and something in me that had been filed carefully under irrelevant quietly rearranged itself into something else. Vance Talent Partners had been incorporated 3 years ago. Before that, before the staffing company that Diana had found so worthy of dinner party entertainment, there had been 7 years of corporate HR work that I had performed with the specific focused patience of someone who is learning everything they need to know while appearing to do something else entirely. I had worked for 2 large firms and 1 boutique consultancy. I had managed hiring for teams across 3 industries. I had developed, over those 7 years, a very particular understanding of where the corporate talent market was broken. Not at the obvious points, which everyone could see, but at the structural level, in the systems and incentives and relationship gaps that created chronic misalignment between the companies that needed exceptional people and the exceptional people who needed the right companies. Vance Talent Partners was built specifically to address those gaps, not a traditional staffing agency. I was precise about this distinction in every client conversation, though it was lost entirely on Diana, and had clearly never been worth attempting on the family at large. Not a recruiter, a talent architecture firm. A company that designed the hiring infrastructure, the role frameworks, the candidate pipeline systems, and the onboarding ecosystems that allowed growing companies to build teams that actually worked. We had 14 full-time employees, 31 active clients, a referral rate, which I considered the most honest metric in our industry, of 73%. In our third fiscal year, revenue had crossed $3.8 million. Diana had called it a staffing company in this economy. Among our 31 active clients was a regional property management company headquartered in the same city where my father and Diana lived. The company was called Harwick Properties. They had come to us 8 months ago through a referral from one of our healthcare sector clients. A growing firm with a talent retention problem and a hiring process that had been producing expensive mismatches for 2 consecutive years. We had rebuilt their hiring infrastructure from the ground up. The results, now visible in their 8-month retention data, were significant. Diana had been employed by Harwick Properties for 4 years. She was a senior leasing coordinator, a role that, as of 8 months ago, sat inside a hiring and HR framework that my firm had designed, implemented, and continued to manage. Her position description had been rewritten by one of my analysts. Her onboarding documentation had been restructured by my operations team. Her bi-weekly payroll was processed through the Associator system we administered. My company's name, Vance Talent Partners, appeared on the vendor agreement in Harwick's operational files. Diana's name appeared on my client's employee roster. She was, in the precise technical sense of the word, on my payroll. She had been on my payroll for 8 months. She had spent those 8 months, as far as I could reconstruct, entirely unaware of this fact. I had known since the day the contract was signed. I had said nothing, not from planning, not from patience, from the simple professional ethics of someone who keeps client relationships and family relationships in separate compartments, because the alternative is a kind of chaos that serves no one. Then she raised her wine glass, and 23 people laughed, and the compartment developed a crack. I drove home on Sunday morning. I sat in my apartment, the apartment I owned, in the building I did not own, but had been in the process of making an offer on, in the city where I had built something real for 3 years, while my family filed it under charming experiment. And I sat with the dinner for 36 hours. Not the anger. The anger was simple and metabolized quickly. What I sat with was the longer, more complicated question of what I was going to do with what I knew. I could do nothing. This was the option I had been exercising for 8 months. It was clean. It was professional. It required no confrontation and no exposure, and no explanation of the particular irony that the woman who had just mocked my business in front of 23 people had been receiving her paycheck through the infrastructure my business had built. Or I could do something, not something dramatic, not something designed to humiliate or expose or reverse the dinner party's dynamics in some satisfying cinematic way. Something small, something professional, something that simply made the truth available to the people who deserved to have access to it. On Tuesday morning, I called Harwick's CEO, a direct and pragmatic woman named Helen, whom I had worked with closely across the 8 months of our engagement. I need to flag a potential conflict of interest, I said. Helen was immediately attentive. What kind? One of your employees is a family member of mine, I said. I wasn't aware of it when we signed the contract. I discovered it afterward. It hasn't affected our work, but I want it on record. Who? I told her. A pause. Diana Mercer. Senior leasing. Yes. Is there an issue with her performance? None, I said. This is purely a disclosure. I want the relationship documented correctly. Helen processed this with the brisk efficiency I had come to expect from her. Appreciated. I'll note it in the vendor file. Anything else? One more thing, I said. Her role classification. When we did the HR audit at onboarding, her position was flagged as potentially misclassified relative to her actual responsibilities. I remember, Helen said. We deferred it. I'd like to revisit it, I said. If her scope warrants reclassification, it should be corrected. That's what we're here for. Helen agreed. My team ran the analysis. Diana's actual scope of work, the client relationships she managed, the reporting responsibilities she carried, the complexity of the leasing portfolios she handled, placed her solidly in the Senior 2 classification CLEFIC rather than Senior I, a distinction that carried a 14% compensation difference. We documented the finding. We submitted the reclassification recommendation. Helen approved it within 48 hours. Diana's corrected classification and adjusted compensation appeared in the HR system on a Friday. She received a formal notification from Harwick HR the following Monday, informing her of the reclassification, the compensation adjustment, and, in the standard language of our HR documentation template, the name of the consulting firm whose audit had identified and corrected the discrepancy, Vance Talent Partners, my company, my name. Diana called my father first. I know this because my father called me within the hour, a Tuesday afternoon, late enough that I had finished most of my meetings and was sitting at my desk reviewing a client proposal when my phone rang with his name on the screen. Diana got a letter today, he said. I know, I said. A pause that told me he had not expected that response. You know, he said. Harwick Properties has been a client of mine for 8 months, I said. Diana's been in our HR system since the contract started. Another pause. Longer. She's on your payroll, he said slowly, with the careful tone of a man who is understanding something and wants to make sure he is understanding it correctly. Our client's payroll, I said. We administer it, yes, for 8 months, yes. And you never. It's a client relationship, Dad. It stays professional. A silence. The letter says she's getting a raise, he said. A reclassification, I said. Her role scope warranted a Senior 2 classification. It hadn't been corrected. We corrected it. You gave your stepmother a raise, he said. I corrected a classification error for an employee of my client, I said. She happens to be my stepmother. My father was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. Petra, he said. His voice had shifted into a register I recognized from childhood. The voice he used when he was about to say something he had been not saying for a long time. The dinner. Last weekend. What Diana said. It's fine. I said. It's not, he said. I should have said something. I sat there and I laughed, and I should have said something. I had not expected that. Not the content. I had imagined various versions of this conversation across the years, and some of them had included my father acknowledging what he allowed at that table. But the timing, the directness, the absence of the careful hedging he usually employed when Diana was the subject. You laughed, I said, not as accusation, as fact. I know, he said. I'm sorry. 2 words, simple, undecorated. My father apologizing, without architecture, for something specific. I sat with it for a moment. Thank you, I said. Diana called on Thursday. I had given her 2 days after the letter, and 1 day after whatever conversation she and my father had in the interval. I had not counted on her calling at all, had assigned perhaps 30% probability to a direct call, and the rest to silence or a routed message through my father. She called. I got the letter, she said, when I answered. Flat, direct. The performance stripped away completely. I know, I said. Vance Talent Partners, she said. That's yours. Yes, you've been my job for 8 months. The HR system. The payroll. That's your company. Yes. A silence that had a different quality than Diana's usual silences. Usually, her silences were strategic. Space she created to let other people fill with something she could use. This one was unstrategic. This one was a woman sitting inside a realization that was still arriving. And then you corrected my classification, she said. Your scope warranted it, I said. It was an error. We corrected it. After the dinner, she said. After I initiated the review before the dinner, I said. The timing of the letter was administrative, not personal. Another silence. That's either very professional, she said slowly, or the most sophisticated thing anyone has ever done to me. It's professional, I said. That's all, Petra. Her voice changed. Something underneath the composed surface shifted and became briefly, unexpectedly visible. I didn't know what you'd built. I genuinely didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. I should have asked, she said. 15 years and I never... She stopped. I never actually asked, no, I said. You didn't. I mocked something I didn't understand in front of people who trusted my judgment, she said. That was wrong. I had not expected her to arrive here. Not this directly, not this quickly. Yes, I said. It was. I'm sorry, she said. For last weekend. And for the 15 years that looked like last weekend. I sat in my office, my firm, my 14 employees, my 31 clients, my $3. 8 million in revenue built from the wreckage of what she had called a perfectly good corporate career. And I felt the particular complicated feeling of receiving an apology from someone you stopped needing one from a long time ago and have now, unexpectedly, received it anyway. It did not undo 15 years. It did not transform our relationship into something it had never been. But it was real. It was unsolicited. It was the closest Diana had ever come to seeing me accurately. Thank you, as I said. Is there? She paused. Is there something I can do? See me correctly from here, I said. That's enough. I'll try, she said. Good, I said. So will I. My father called that Sunday. He called to tell me that he had spoken to Diana and that things were. He paused, searching for the right word, recalibrating. Recalibrating, I said. It's the most accurate word I have, he said. I thought about that. It's a good word, I said. He asked about the firm. Real questions, specific, engaged, the questions of a man who had decided that the distance between his understanding and his daughter's reality was a distance he was responsible for closing. I answered him honestly. All of it. The structure, the clients, the methodology, the numbers. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I always knew you'd build something. I just didn't know it would look like this. What did you think it would look like? I asked. Something I'd recognize, he said. Something with a title I'd know. I didn't account for the possibility that you'd build something new. Most people don't, I said. I should have, he said. I know you well enough. You do, I said. You just stopped looking. I know, he said. I'm looking now. The next family dinner was at my apartment. I had not hosted before, had always arrived at other people's tables, had always been the guest in rooms other people had arranged. This time I arranged the room. 23 people came. The same 23 from the dinner where the laughter had happened. The same cousins and aunts and peripheral spouses navigating the family's fault lines. Diana arrived with a bottle of wine and the careful quietness of a woman who was learning a new way of being in a room with me. My Aunt Carol asked about the firm. I told her. She listened, actually listened, without the polite performance of listening, and at the end said, That's remarkable, Petra, genuinely. I looked at her. Thank you, I said. My cousin Brett, to his credit, asked a follow-up question, and the dinner moved forward, imperfectly, with the awkward energy of people adjusting to a new configuration, but forward. At one point, Diana caught my eye across the table. She raised her wineglass slightly. Not a performance. not a punchline. Something simpler. I raised mine back. It was not everything, but it was a beginning at a table I had set, and that, I had decided, was more than enough. Before you go, I have to ask you this. Do you think Petra handled this the right way? Should she have told Diana the truth from day one? Or was the silent correction more powerful? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and this question has no wrong answer. I genuinely want to know what you think. If this story hit something real for you, if you have ever been laughed at for something you were quietly building into something extraordinary, hit that like button right now. Every like puts this story in front of someone who needs to hear it today. Share it with someone who is still in the building phase, still being mocked by people who haven't bothered to look closely. And if you believe that the most powerful response to being underestimated is to simply keep building, subscribe, because every week this channel tells the stories of women who were dismissed, doubted, and laughed at, and built empires anyway. Your first month of Audible is completely free. Over 500,000 titles in the description below. For the builders, the late-night workers, the ones who never stopped. The link is there. Use it.